Welcome to another episode of Miami Cop Talk. I'm Raul. With me is my co-host and partner, Robert Asencio. We want to go ahead and give a shout out to our local partners and sponsors, Miami Tactical, Mainland Marlins, and Share Your Heart. And last but not least, New Era Alliances. Go ahead and say hi to the folks, Robert.
Hey everyone, great to have you here with us at MiamiCopTalk.com. Join us. This should be a very lively conversation. A lot of stuff's going on in the media, but what do you say we get it kicked off, Raul?
Let's get started. MiamiCopTalk.com. Here we go. Robert, we have an incident that occurred in Minnesota where an officer pulled over a young man who apparently had a expired tag. And then after they ran the tag, he had a warrant. I know there are a lot of things out on the news saying, oh, he had an air freshener and he was pulled over. A lot of things on social media that are just not accurate. I've been doing a lot of reading up on this, but the basic, I don't have all the information, obviously, but from what I've been able to gather and from my sources, they did a traffic stop, expired tag. They ran the tag. He had a warrant, and the young man resisted. They tried to take him into custody. The officer attempted to tase the subject, made a fatal mistake and grabbed her firearm instead of the taser, and that young man is no longer alive today. The officer has resigned, the chief of police has resigned, and we are back to seeing a city in Minnesota rioting and going crazy, or as some would like to say, peacefully protesting.
No, there's no peaceful there. There's no peaceful there. Not when you're burning, looting, victimizing the innocent, right? Two wrongs do not make a right. As a matter of fact, no pun intended, Daunte Wright, his parents today called for calm. And let's hope that the city and those that are looting and rioting calm down. Look, we know that there's all kinds of injustices out there, but we live in a country of rules, laws, and we also have seen, many of us have seen the video, the body cam of Officer Potter, Kim Potter, last year, veteran of the Minnesota Police Department, where she, after she shoots the Daunte Wright, she says, "Shit, I shot him." Daunte drives off. Look, Daunte's actions were not correct. Fearful or not, he struggled with the cops. Now, he had a warrant, misdemeanor warrant, for another incident. I think in that incident that he had been identified with a firearm, but it still was a misdemeanor warrant. He was stopped for a tag that was, I believe, expired, or there was a registration issue. That's why he was stopped. This was a traffic stop that escalated and resulted in his death.
Correct.
Actions led to the officer thought she was discharging her taser and wound up shooting him. That's not a good situation.
Not at all. Not at all. You know me well, Robert. I value life at all levels. I'm a pro-lifer. I value life all the way from from the womb to the grave. I value life, and it breaks my heart that this young man is no longer around. His family loved him. I'm sure there's somebody who loved him, and I'm sorry to see that he's no longer around. The fact of the matter is, the officer made a huge mistake. A huge mistake. There's no doubt that the officer made a huge mistake. The fact of the matter is, they both made a mistake. Daunte Wright resisted, and the officer made a huge mistake by grabbing her weapon instead of her taser. I tell people all the time, I tell my daughters, I tell everybody, police, their reaction to your actions. Follow orders, follow, lawful orders, make sure that if the officer tells you, put your hands on the hood, put your hands on the hood. If you are, being pulled over, pull over. Try to, nothing is worth you losing your life because an untrained officer, a nervous officer, an incompetent officer, however it may be. Again, we'll let the investigation, take a, run its course, but nothing's worth you losing your life, but by the hands of law enforcement.
Let's get into why people are going to tune into this podcast, right? They want to hear what others won't talk. And you and I who are retired, you and I who spent respectably close to 30 years on the job. You spent 30 years. I spent 26 years on the job in law enforcement. We worked the streets of Miami when I can remember going out on the street and encountering somebody with a gun once, twice, maybe several times a week. I can remember being shot at. I remember you being shot at. So let's talk about this. We're dealing with fear. We're dealing with actions. Look, that video of the body cam that was, behind Officer Potter, focus on the car. That exchange between the officer and Daunte. Man, that was just a heated exchange, and it went physical. She, I believe, tried to handcuff him. He broke, pushed away. Whatever the case is, I'm sure Daunte Wright was trying to get out of there, and he was scared, right? And I'm also sure the officer had adrenaline and probably equally scared, because one thing officers seldom admit is that we too get scared. So that part right there is the genesis and the end of the very tragic situation. Was it the officer? I mean, is it a training issue? Is it somebody that maybe shouldn't be on the job? Or just maybe, and people are going to freak out when I say this, could it have been just an accident? And I know what they're saying. The gun, I've had a gun and I've had a taser, right? Although I never carried a taser. But I know what the two feel like, and they do. There is a difference in how.
Yeah, there's a weight difference. They look different. I'll tell you this. I just dropped my phone here. Let me go ahead and tell you. I had one of our listeners reach out to me today and asked, how can this officer make a mistake and grab her weapon and not her taser? So I explained to them from a training perspective, and we've seen this in the movies when a crisis situation comes up, people always say, "Don't panic, don't panic." What happens is, in a panic stage, you lose cognitive decline, and when you lose cognitive decline, you are not thinking correctly, obviously. And the stress level, I believe, in this officer's mind got to the point, and you can see in that video, she's actually pointing her weapon, her firearm, at this man, and she's saying, "I'm going to tase you." Now, can't she see what she's holding in her hand? And the answer to that from the listener, I said, no, she can't see that. When you lose cognitive decline in her hand, she thought she was holding the taser.
So let's talk about that cognitive decline. Let's talk about the emotional, the physical and emotional reactions.
You lose dexterity. There are so many things. There's that
vision.
You see the red principle, and listen. The fact is, the officer screwed up. That's muscle memory. That's right. Training. You don't carry your taser where on the same side as your firearm. You said it. She said it. She resigned today. She made a mistake. Now, where do we stand from here? There's a loss of life. They made a mistake. You and I have talked about this offline. Third leading cause of death in the United States is medical mistakes. And I don't think people are that upset about the third leading cause of death in this country being medical mistakes as they are, as when police and law enforcement make a mistake. That really pisses people off. And I think something that we've been talking about is when police make the mistake, police are that basic representation of government that we see all the time. And people really are not that happy with their government, I would imagine, and they just take it out on the police, especially with the police.
You just said something. Please go back to that, because what you just said is a reality that many people are, are feeling. They feel that they've been left behind by government. And let's not say the boogeyman, right?
Oh,
let's quantify what the government is and how people are left behind.
Hey, you know it. We got friends that have gone through real bitter divorce, and they have the disdain towards women in general. And I'm like, hey, man,
of course,
you can't judge all women based on your ex-wife. So, you know, what happens is when we start using that broad brush, we are painting a nasty picture. And I think what happens is when people see police, they see a representation of a failed government in one way, shape, or form, and people love to hate the police.
Hey, man,
not all people, correct. Corruption. Not all people.
No, oppression.
Correct.
Oppression.
You know,
suppression.
We're back to blue kind of guys. There are a lot of people out there that back to blue. But there are a lot of people that are upset at law enforcement, you know, and they push that defund the police issue and blah, 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 blah. But
Raul, here's a point that I like to or actually something I'd like to get your thoughts on. Look, I support our brothers and sisters, right? But I also recognize that in law enforcement, just like any other part of society, it is a microcosm of society. You know, it's a subset of the society. There are a lot of racist cops, right? And as you said, you aptly told me, you know, racism, we all have biases, and then not necessarily against the law, right? And it's how the agencies manage the officers, how they vet the officers, how they treat the officers, right? And how they address misactions and misdeeds. Let's face it, you know, although we have some level of racism in all levels of society, does that account, or is that the cause for this increase of police citizen violent contacts? Do you think that that's really what the nut of the problem is, the root of the problem is here?
I don't. I think that's what the propagandists out there want us to believe. I think ultimately police work hasn't improved dramatically. As a matter of fact, if you look at a lot of our major cities, the chief executive officer of those cities, including Miami, are either minorities or female. So we do have a diverse representation in law enforcement. Are there racist cops? Absolutely. There are racist doctors, lawyers, politicians. There are racist firefighters. There are racist. Racism is something that people have innate in whatever upbringing they got, whatever. And I tell people all the time, it's not illegal to be a racist. You know, it's not illegal. Now, it's illegal.
Action against somebody else, and it's illegal.
No. Yeah. No, it's not illegal to be a racist. It's illegal to use your racist bias to determine the behavior of an employer, of the way you enforce the law. You know, you can't discriminate. So, you know, there's people out there. You know,
I'm sorry, Raul. Would you agree that some officers are, you know, have been abusive towards the community?
Ironically, you say that. I think many officers have been abusive to the community, and some of them have been abusive to their own community. Yeah. Black officers have been very abusive to their own Black community, and Hispanic officers have been abusive to their own Hispanic community. Why? Because it's our community, and you may be derogatory towards your family to those that you assimilate with versus others, and that's wrong in itself. You know. I had an officer one time in the Carroll City area speak very negative about the African American community, and it was an African American officer. And I looked at that officer and I said, "What are you saying, brother?" And that officer said to me, "I can say that because I was born and raised in this community." I said, "No, you can't. You can't say that because you were born and raised in this community. You know, the fact of the matter is, it's wrong. What's wrong is wrong, regardless of the color." Regardless of the circumstance, wrong is wrong. That's why I tell you, and you know me, I tend to be a man of faith. I let my faith drive my decisions, not the other way around. And if I use my faith as the plumb line to my decisions, You know, I tell people, you know, if I help people, God helps me. And I try wholeheartedly to not look at people as black, white, female, whatever, Cuban, Puerto Rican. I look at people as it says it in Genesis. All were made in the image of God. We were all brothers and sisters in God. And that's the way I see people. Now, some people, you know, act inappropriately and they're dealt with in a certain way. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I try to look at people and I say this, my wife and my daughters say, Dad, you're always saying that. I go, I love everybody. And the fact of the matter is, I may hate some people for what they do, but ultimately, you know, there's a saying, there's an old saying that says, I don't have to like you to sit down and have a beer with you. I'll drink with you, and especially if you're the one buying. But the fact of the matter is, I don't have to like you to treat you with respect. I don't have to like you to treat you like a human being.
So I think,
And I think
I'm sorry,
and I think that's what we're missing in a lot of aspects of our society, not so much in law enforcement, because law enforcement has DOs, SOPs, guidelines, procedures, and if you start thinking about it, it's almost like a robotic methodology, use of force, and all you got. If officers would follow procedures, guidelines, and policies, I think we'd be pretty much okay. I think when we deviate from that, it becomes an issue.
Well, let's talk about this, because you just hit on a couple of good points. I mean, to unpack what you just said, yes, some officers have been abusive to those communities, but the communities have also been abusive to officers, right? So that's part of this.
Can you repeat that? Can you
Yes,
repeat
no,
that
definitely. Some communities have been violent or abusive towards officers. So, you know, this is a situation I think is getting worse by the day.
Yeah.
You know, Dade County, we had our share of criminal, civil disturbances created by police, right? At the hands of police. We had a couple of riots that you and I worked.
Yeah.
And we also know that standards were developed past the burning of Dade County, right? What was it? McDuffie, the Arthur McDuffie riots, the famous Arthur McDuffie riots were on 79th Street or what was it, 62nd Street or 54th Street and 27th Avenue. The General Tire Store could be seen burning for miles, right?
Yeah, we've had McDuffie, Lozano, the Mercado, Carlos Alvarez. There's been
quite a few.
Yeah.
And we know that standards, just like police chases, you know, they came up with police chases. I can remember chasing somebody for a tag, right? A tag being stolen or the guy fails to stop, right? And then now there's this countywide chase policy, and it's strictly enforced. And, you know, so standards have been developed. The supervisors kind of set the tone for that community, and then the officers abide by it. And I think that we in Dade County have come a long way, but I wonder, and I agree. We've already had people on the show that have agreed. The officer and policing in Dade County, it's light years away, far better, less abusive than they are in other parts of the country, in spite of what anybody says. Just look at the statistics. And even then you have officers who make mistakes. But here's the question. What toll do all these incidents have or take on officers that are out there supposedly going to have to go against the same criminals that are out there that would not think twice about harming a civilian, let alone an officer? What toll does that take on our officers? What are our officers thinking now? I'd like to get some thoughts on that, man, because it's got to be hell to be a cop today.
Oh yeah, well, you know, the retention is not there. People are quitting. They're retiring. You know, the recruitment is hard. I mean, all major police departments are hiring. I think there's an issue there. We're going to see the consequences of what's going on now, years to come. That's why you and I have these conversations. And you know, I know you laugh at me at times, but I think technology and from a virtual policing out there. There, how we're going to go ahead and infuse a lot of this artificial intelligence into the day-to-day policing. I think it's going to make a huge difference. And I think what we need to start looking at is different kinds of tactics and training. We get caught up in our own ways. And here, I'll put this out there. Tactical disengagement. A tactical disengagement. There's got to be all kinds of training. In this specific situation, Daunte Wright, this young man shouldn't be dead today. The fact is, they knew who he was. The minute he resisted, here's a bizarre strategy. Tactical disengagement. Now, I understand he can jump in his car, drive away, and kill somebody in a traffic crash or whatever. But in a tactical disengagement of sorts, you can get units to the scene, and try to avoid that fleeing. But tactical disengagement where you take your, who he is, he is, and you talked about the no chase policy. I don't know. There are a lot of things that need to be explored out there. Here I'll jump a little bit into. We've seen that military guy in fatigue that was approached in a felony stop. 2 cops pull him over. Hey, a tactical strong approach. Well, you don't know what's in the vehicle. So we're going to have to start expanding the way we do things in law enforcement. Not me anymore. I do training, but I'm not out there anymore. But there's got to be new ways of doing the same thing that we're doing, but in new ways, because the community's watching. People are not complying. Unfortunately, Daunte Wright was not complying. Unfortunately, the military guy was not complying. But the officer's reactions to that non-compliance is what makes the difference. And I think ultimately that officer response to non-compliance is what needs to be addressed in some new age type training procedures, because what's occurring is not being received very favorably by certain segments of our community.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's becoming harder and harder to be a police officer, right? A police officer calls for many times subhuman, non-human reactions. I mean, think about the second guessing. And we've all seen officers who have second guessed themselves and paid the price, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We know that there's officers, and we've lost officers during our career, who probably fell into that category with a second guessed. And that second guessing cost them their lives.
Correct.
I remember.
In Maryland, we talked about what happened in Maryland, where they went ahead and stripped the Bill of Rights from officers. So think about this: the communities, the legislature. The legislature stripped them of their Bill of Rights in Maryland. The governor vetoed it, but they were able to override his veto. But in the state of Maryland, officers are losing their Bill of Rights. So you say they're getting pressure from the community, they're getting pressure from politicians, and then their due process rights are no longer there in Maryland. How many more states are going to strip officers of their Bill of Rights? Who knows? But it's becoming harder and harder every day to be a police officer in the United States of America.
Absolutely. So for those of you guys that are listening and those that will listen to this podcast, it'll be after we record and put it up online. Please drop us a line at go to MiamiCopTalk.com. Go to our website. You'll see our email there. You'll see our phone number. Go to our check out our videos. It's really important that we get your information, your input. Tell us what you think.
Absolutely.
MiamiCopTalk.com. This is about all of us. And this is not just about law enforcement. It's about stakeholders really addressing the issues. Look, I wouldn't want to be an officer today because, and that's the profession I really love. I love being in the military. I really like being in the legislature. But I think my heart still lies with those people that are on the street, our brothers and sisters that are behind the badge, honorably serving. There's no greater satisfaction when you do the job and things come out.
Absolutely.
But it's also very frustrating. It's taken its toll. Let us know what you think. Again, MiamiCopTalk.com.
Absolutely. And as we get ready to close out, let us make it perfectly clear. We support our law enforcement on Miami Cop Talk. We support the men and women in law enforcement. We are 2 former law enforcement officers, and we see wrong when wrong is wrong. And unfortunately, by this officer's own admission in the incident we've been talking about, the officer was wrong, and now someone's lost their life. So we need to try to do better with what we have. And we really, like Robert just said, we appreciate your engagement. Reach out to us, MiamiCopTalk.com, and let us know what you think. Ask us questions, get engaged, and maybe we'll have your name mentioned on the show if you want it, and we'll give you a shout out. So again, MiamiCopTalk.com. We appreciate the listeners. We appreciate what's going on. This was a brief episode on the discussion of Daunte Wright's incident in Minnesota. And again, we'd like to hear what you have to say or think about what occurred. Again, MiamiCopTalk.com. Thank you for listening. And until we see you or hear from you, stay tuned. MiamiCopTalk.com.